Welcome to our in-person audience and our virtual audience out there. This is our Curated Cuisine series, and I'm so happy that we have Biplaw and Kwaa with us tonight, the heart and brains of Comfort Kitchen. Biplaw was born in Nepal, and he is the business manager of the shop, and Kwasi is the chef. They met at Dudley Cafe, which was co-founded by Biplaw, and they discovered their mutual passion for food and social justice and empowerment. This summer, they opened their new restaurant in Upham's Corner. We can't wait. Biplaw was talking about it, and I'm sure they'll talk about it. It's going to be fabulous. Our Curated Cuisine moderator is Irene Li, a chef, entrepreneur, and powerhouse in her own right. She also has a title to add to her resume. Last week, Irene was awarded the James Beard Award for Leadership for, quote, visionaries responsible for creating a healthier, safer, and more equitable and sustainable food system. Not only does she share the award with Michelle Obama, who won it many years ago, she is the youngest person ever to win it. A little housekeeping, Kwasi is going to be joining us. He's in New York City, so he will be with us virtual. If you have any questions, you can see, just type in Slido and hashtag Curated Cuisine, and we'll be taking your questions throughout the hour. And then at the end, we'll be sharing a morsel from Comfort Kitchen that they've made, which is to die for. Take it away, Irene.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you everyone for joining us in person and virtually. Biplaw and Kwasi, it's so nice to be here with you both.
Yes, awesome. So good, thank you.
Yeah, we go way back, but I'm still going to do one of my standard icebreakers, which is I would love to hear about in your family when you were growing up, how did you cook and eat rice? Kwasi, would you like to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I wave the jollof rice banner strong and heavy everywhere I go. Anybody that knows anything about West Africa, it is our thing, and battles have been waged over it. So, jollof rice was at the center of every Christmas, birthdays, you name it. So that's how we prevented it.
Thank you. And for those of us who may not have enjoyed jollof rice before, can you describe it in just a couple sentences?
So, jollof rice is a single pot rice dish. A lot of different cultures have that same single pot rice dish, but with different spices, different tomato-based sauces, and sometimes not even tomato-based sauces, just spices, and that's it. Ours is a spicy tomato base, and usually goat, some type of beef or chicken, whatever you're into.
Amazing. And Biplaw, what about you?
So rice was an integral part of our family as well, just like Kwasi's. If we didn't have rice for dinner, we had it for breakfast. If not for breakfast, we had it for lunch.
Sometimes both or all three.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We had it as porridge or pulao, so all sorts of things.
Well, now I'm hungry. I think this is a great time for us to talk a little bit about what people can expect from the menu at Comfort Kitchen. You've been doing pop-ups and catering all over the greater Boston area. I have gotten to sample some of your incredible food, but can you tell us a little bit about the cuisine and what people can expect to see? And
Sure.
Maybe we'll start with you, Biplaw.
Sure. So we do global comfort food, and so we've been following the spice trade that starts in India, and it travels all the way to Africa and Caribbean nations. So that's the journey that we've been following. And for our last pop-up, we did Mediterranean, North African. Just the spice trade is what we are focusing on. I'll let Kwasi add to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you started with rice, because rice is one of those dishes that kind of transcends every community, every culture, and following the spice trade and the trade routes in general, a lot of cuisines followed based on where the spices went. And things like grains, just like rice, is the same thing. So we're trying to find the kind of common places where these dishes, and celebrating the ingredients and the people behind them.
And I love that you said that it's all about global comfort food. I think those are maybe two phrases that don't always go together
Right.
because we have a very specific concept of what comfort food is, maybe
Correct.
here in the US. What is the name Comfort Kitchen all about? Certainly the comfort food aspect, but it has some other references, right?
Right, absolutely. So for us, for a very long time, a lot of people, especially for people of color or communities of color, we weren't welcome in some spaces, intensely or not intensely.
Right.
And our intention is to make it open for everyone. And we're just not talking about just race, but we're talking about class as well. So we have a concept of having cafe in the morning and dinner service at night. So cafe service is going to be more accessible to a lot of folks, and dinner might be more curated for certain events. So yeah.
I love that. And can you tell us a little bit about the neighborhood and what that neighborhood means to you?
Absolutely. So we are opening in Upham's Corner in Dorchester, and we've lived in Dorchester for a very long time. So it's our home, and also it's our working space. Upham's Corner is going through a bit of a change. So City of Boston has designated it as a cultural center. And so there's a lot of stuff happening. Boston Public Library is coming up. Strand Theater is getting a makeover.
Wow.
There's lots of arts and cultural buildings being propped up. It is a very old neighborhood. So it's actually one of the most diverse neighborhood in America. That's what we learned.
Wow.
And also it had its first supermarket in America. So Marketplace with the butcher shop was first opened in Upham's Corner.
Wow.
Right across from where we will be.
That's amazing history. And
Yep.
Kwasi, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the history of the building itself, which I recall is kind of interesting.
So it was a comfort station, essentially a restroom. Part of our name comes from what it was called, and I think the last time it was used was, correct me if I'm wrong, 1972.
Yeah, you got it, 1971. 1 year.
And there's a lot of historic value behind that building. In fact, right next to it, there's a cemetery that has like former slaves and slave owners buried in the same lot, which was unheard of. In fact, still unheard of. But there's a lot of history to go into there. But when we were kind of developing the concept, we were all very into the idea of exploring different cuisines. And when we found out the place was called Comfort Station, it was almost we couldn't walk away from that truth. So we decided to name it Comfort Kitchen, and we just decided to make sure we're kind of differentiating where we're not just creating the narrative of American. When people think of comfort food, a lot of times the notion is South American comfort food, which in itself is great, but we want to expand the bandwidth and the horizon.
I love that. And I think one thing I wanted to make sure we talked about today is a lot of people are meeting Biplaw and Kwasi for the first time, as this has become a very high profile and exciting restaurant opening. But you guys have been working on this project for years.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the process has looked like, what the really hard parts have been, what the fun parts have been?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kwasi and I met in High Rise Bakery in Cambridge in 2009. And Kwasi was working in the kitchen. I was front of the house manager. So that's how we crossed our path. And we both come from immigrant backgrounds. My background is a little different than Kwasi's. I came here as a college student. And for most part of my college life, I was working in restaurants or cafes because that was the most easiest places to get jobs for immigrants. And Kwasi has a different story on it. And along that time, we saw working behind the counter the difference between, who gets the shine, who gets the shout out,
Right.
and who's doing the hard work and the hard labor.
Right.
And our intention with Comfort Kitchen is we got to bring our story to the forefront, tell our story, authentic story, and we'll take it from there. So we've been talking about inequalities in the restaurant industry, I don't know, since 2009, 2010, for a very long time. 2015, when I opened Dudley Cafe, Kwasi and his team with Shelly, Amanda, they had a spoken word night at Dudley Cafe. And Kwasi and Shelly had a pop-up called Chop Bar. And so that's where the concept of the food came in. And fast forward to 2019, we had an opportunity from Historic Boston, which, who are our landlords for the restaurant. They offered us the space. And so we've been talking about this concept since 2009, 10, but more so 2019. And during pandemic, everything was just upside down, especially the restaurant industry. So everything was like boiling up to the surface. And for us, it became even more important to put our best foot forward,
Right.
and make, positive change in small ways, in our own ways.
Yeah. And Kwasi, you've worked at a lot of different restaurants in the Boston area. What does it feel like to be working on your own menu and your own concept?
Well, I think I'm going to backtrack for a quick second.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I want to talk about is, Biplaw mentioned inequality in restaurant. I loved working in restaurants. I always did. And there was just such a disparity there that, there was this unsustainable way of life there that it's either you were working two jobs, or if you were working one job, you had to there was just too much. And I think the pandemic kind of revealed the curtain over it. And Bipla and I would always have conversations about, oh man, I love doing this. I would love to do this, but how do we do it in a sensible way? And how do we do it where we're not kind of repeating the cycle of what was happening? Not to bash on the restaurant industry. This is the love of our lives here. But it was, and I don't. People, I think, approached me about a restaurant several times. It wasn't until Comfort Kitchen came along, and we knew that we can build something outside of just a restaurant. Create revenue streams that is not just based on or circled around the food. I mean, we're looking to have an incubator space for the neighborhood. We're looking to have an open space for artists in the neighborhood. We're really trying to incorporate everything that needs to stay in the neighborhood within the restaurant. And that concept seemed amazing to me. And it seemed like something that we could do that would be sustainable and not have to kind of, what's it called? What's the word I'm looking for here? Take shortcuts in taking care of people.
A lot of compromises in this industry, for sure. Folks, I just want to remind everyone that if you have a question for any of our guests, you can head to slido.com and enter Curated Cuisine. And we do have a question from the audience right now, which is, after 2 years of the pandemic, is starting a new restaurant exciting and also terrifying?
Both.
Yeah.
It is terrifying because things are moving at a very rapid pace, especially in restaurant industry. Things are changing fast.
Yeah.
But also things are not changing
Fast enough.
So we are right in a space where I think, there's a lot of young, smart minds in food industry that are doing like innovative work, and I think we are heading towards like a better future for restaurants. So
Yeah.
that's exciting for us. Like we get to be part of that. It is terrifying because we are in a space where we are learning every day. And opening a restaurant is just not about food. There's a whole part about raising funds and a whole laundry list of things. So we are learning, and it's exciting, but also terrifying.
Yeah. What about for you, Kwasi?
It's exciting, terrifying, and crazy. But we're going to do it anyway. Because, when, again, like I said, for us, it's not about just a restaurant. It's actually a friends and family business. I mean, we have families' lives that are tied to it, friends' lives that are tied to it. So I think that fuels us in a way that I don't think doing anything else would be able to, at least for me anyway. Speaking for myself, it fuels me in a way that, doing anything else will not be able to satisfy that. So the excitement of being able to continue the project alone is worth it.
Of that. I'm curious, Biplaw, maybe we could start with you, but for folks who might not be as familiar with what it's like to work in the restaurant industry, what are some of the things that you've seen or the inequalities that you're aware of that you're really hoping to eliminate in
Right.
our industry at large and as you open Comfort Kitchen?
Right. One thing I always talk about restaurant industry is if you want to look at how United States operates, you just tear apart restaurant industry and it's right there.
Right.
It's healthcare, it's immigration, it's, gender inequality, thank you. How we process food, how food travels, global politics, it's all in there. So I think if, as a society, if we look deeper into this and try to solve some of the problems in the restaurant industry, it is just going to help in other parts of the world.
Right.
Or the nation. What was the question?
I guess just I'm curious about, maybe it's wages, maybe
Right.
it's benefits. If there are certain plans that you have in place or areas where you're most excited to kind of dig in and make sure that you're able to make a difference.
Yeah, there's no one model that works for all. So, and the way we have raised funds or like how this project came about is very unique. And we are looking at what fits for us.
Right.
And it's a learning process. It's not a one solid answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kwasi, what about you?
I think first we start with wages because it's something that anybody that's been in the restaurant industry knows it's tough. And I mean, it's not tough just because people are trying to be shady. It's tough because the profit margins are small. Like, that's the reality of it. And, we have really sat down and tried to figure out different revenue streams. So we're able to bolster the kind of money that can go into that. Another thing is, healthcare, dental care. I know Bibla and I have had countless conversations about how do we create a system that works in our favor here. I think I worked in the restaurant industry for a very long time without health insurance. Whether it was immigration based or just pay wage based. But again, it's not just because people are trying to be shady. If you're not employing more than 70 people, the insurance rate skyrockets crazy. And one of the things that we've been looking into is to kind of form a coalition with other small restaurants, small businesses, or folks that we know and are like-minded to kind of approach this issue with sensible things and share resources, pool resources, so it can ease the burden on everybody involved. So that's the first two things I could really immediately point to. Things where we've had conversation about housing, even. How do we figure that out? So it's an ongoing process for us.
Kwasi, we have a question from the audience, which is, how has the community contributed to the opening of Comfort Kitchen over the past few years?
We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our community, for sure. And especially for Upham's Corner, it's a very community-minded area. So with our community, pandemic, we would probably, we wouldn't have moved this idea ahead if it wasn't for the community, friends, families. Even for yourself, you've supported us from like day one. And it means a lot to us. That's something that really keeps us going, to be honest. It's not it's not about the money. If it was for money, we wouldn't be here for a restaurant in the restaurant industry.
Yep.
It's for the love of what we do. It's a way to give back to the community. And even for myself, my personal story is like, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for, my teachers, my neighbors. So it's a way to give back in double fold.
Yeah. And Kwasi, what about for you? I'm also wondering, you all raised some money through Mainvest. Can you talk a little bit about that, as well as the other ways that your community has really shown up for you?
Yeah, when we actually started the Mainvest campaign, I think pandemic was slowly on the rise, and we didn't expect to get so much support. In fact, I think Mainvest, they said we were one of the first businesses to supersede the 70,000 minimum, and that showed volumes, because it was just like, oh wow, people really are supportive of us. And it's not that we didn't think people were supportive of us, we didn't know the magnitude of it. So that in itself kept us going. And when you talk about the community, it's like, just like Biplaw, for me, I wouldn't be here specifically if it wasn't for the kitchen. If I didn't get into a kitchen somewhere, I actually might not be here. So it's definitely a way of giving back. It's a full circle moment for me. And even our restaurant community tribe, again, yourself, friends, and the industry that have just allowed us to really operate without having an actual kitchen. So that's been very helpful, and it's been very encouraging. And that's why it's very important for us to make sure it happens.
And I heard you mention something a little earlier, Kwasi, about an incubator out of the Comfort Kitchen space. That sounds awesome. Can you tell us a little more about that?
For myself, my career kind of came to fruition through pop-ups. And, one of the things that I realized is like, there are folks that are like us that might not have access to pop-up spaces. And one of the things that we're trying to do is, we're trying to partner with Future Chefs of America, Commonwealth Kitchen, places that are already doing it, and just kind of inviting people into our space and help them kind of develop their concepts as well. And, one of the pop-ups that I had at Wink and Nod, this was many moons ago, but it really opened my eyes to what it meant to actually run the process, the pop-up process. And since then, I've just been kind of trying to learn more and trying to do it. And I feel like if we're able to pass on that opportunity to others, it'll be very helpful. It would enrich the community. It'll help others in the community be able to kind of move forward and do their own thing too. So in the incubator, we're going to be providing not just a space, but support. Like, hey, if you want to do it, why don't you try it this way as opposed to what you're doing? Or just go with that. Just giving advice. Mentorship is something that's very dear to us as well. So being able to just be, a hand over a shoulder to just give advice. I personally, my mentors that are in my life are people that literally supported and just shared, not supported financially or physically. It was just sharing of information meant so much to me. And I think if we're able to share the information from our perspective too, will be helpful to the community. It'll be a way to be participating in the community without having to be so hands-on.
Right. Yeah, there's such a spirit of generosity that pervades what you do, that we get from your team, many of whom are here tonight, and the way that you talk about food and community. I'm wondering, we have a question from the audience about gentrification in Upham's Corner. Wondering how you think about that, since you've been in that neighborhood for a long time, and how that's kind of impacting your mission and the way you want Comfort Kitchen to be in that community.
Yeah, gentrification, woohoo.
Ooh, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, when we got into this location, we knew that when we would open up, there's going to be a list of businesses that would follow us, and it's not going to look the same way it looked like 10 years ago.
Right.
Our mission is to, if we can contain its history, its culture, and sustain a restaurant and employ local folks from the neighborhood, I think we did our job.
Yeah.
But gentrification is one of those things. It's really, we don't have much control over it. Gentrification happened 25 years ago in Boston, and we are seeing the effect of it. It's bigger than us. It's bigger than the city itself. And when I look at city projects in Upham's Corner and Nubian Square, it's the same thing. These things have been planned out 30 years ago.
Right.
And we are just going with it. But as a restaurant owners, we do have a part in not diluting what's there.
Right.
Keeping the history. And if we can make an effort to keep people in the neighborhood, that's even better.
Yeah. Kwasi, what about for you? How do you think about Comfort Kitchen's role in Upham's Corner?
Like Biplaw said, gentrification is bigger than us. I mean, let's call it what it is. I grew up in Somerville in the 90s, right? And Somerville in the 90s is not what Somerville is today, right? And every once in a while I go back to Somerville and I'm like, wow, that's that's so different. And if you look at it, it's just like, unless the community, the business community as a whole, and the local government as a whole is kind of collaborating in a way that creates a partnership effort to avoid displacing folks. As a small business, we could do what we set out to do, and we could, hire folks from the neighborhood and do all these things. But if there's not an equal, my opinion anyway, if there's not an equal partnership between other small businesses and the local government, it's just gonna happen. And like Biplaw said, we're just going with it. But as far as Comfort Kitchen, our mission is definitely to keep folks in the neighborhood involved. We did a survey before we even started this project, asking people what they wanted to see in the neighborhood and all these things, Bibla and Yako. And the response was just overwhelming. Folks want to stay. Folks want to be part of the community. But if, rent all of a sudden skyrockets and you're not able to afford to live in the neighborhood based on the kind of job you have, there's very little Comfort Kitchen can do about that. But what Comfort Kitchen can do is to make sure we have a space that's available to everybody in the neighborhood that's willing to come by, to everybody in the neighborhood currently that's looking for employment, and know that we're definitely open doors. Does that make sense? And that's where we're essentially starting from Comfort Kitchen and hopefully permeating through the sides of Upham's Corner.
I'm gonna cry, you guys. I love that, and I think that we all know that there's this very terrible irony in restaurants, especially higher end restaurants, where so many of the people who work there could never afford to eat there or to live in that neighborhood or to send their kids to the schools where their diners send their kids. Mm-hmm. And I think that to be of the community is something that a lot of restaurants have never really even tried to do. Mm-hmm. Because, importing labor, importing vegetables, right, like bringing it all in from outside and just kind of extracting what you need, mm-hmm, is how we've done things for so long. So that makes me really excited. We have a question about how you mentioned hosting spoken word nights way back. And we're wondering, in what other ways are you envisioning incorporating the community into the way you work at Comfort Kitchen?
Yeah, I mean, arts and culture is definitely on our priority list because that dictates what happens. And we are going to invest a lot of time and energy into arts and culture. We will have events. I mean, the space is going to be a little different. We are not going to be able to host like 100 people for open mic night, but we will have events that will, touch on those issues. Upham's Corner already has a really good network of artists living there. And when we talk about gentrification, actually, there's an artist housing complex that they lost their building, and they were able to keep it. And again, it's because the community made noise, and they made it happen. And that's where we'll come. We will partner with artists. We will partner with artist organizations and do what we need to do.
Thank you. I'm curious about. Sorry. This is a related question that's coming up. What are the particular advantages or challenges of doing this project in our fair city of Boston? You've both seen the city change a lot and also probably not change a lot. And would love to hear kind of your perspective on more broadly, what does Boston have to do with this?
I mean, for me personally, Boston is a second home. So, if it wasn't for Nepal, I would be here. And if not in Boston, I would be in Nepal. So definitely investing a lot of my personal time and energy into calling this place a home.
Yeah.
Boston is, as a city, they've been helpful in terms of us opening, and we've gotten lots of help from the city itself, from the economic department. Challenges is, opening a restaurant, especially for people that are named like Biplaw, Kwasi, Nyako, is like, well, I don't know about that. It's raising funds has been a huge challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, generally raising funds for a restaurant industry is a challenge, and I don't get that part because people love restaurants. Neighborhood want good restaurants to be in the neighborhood, right? But they don't want to invest in restaurants. So that's been a really huge challenge, but we've been lucky, or I don't know, we've been grateful for friends, family, and community again.
Yeah.
That we've been able to move this far and raise money to open the doors. So yeah, definitely raising fund has been one of the most difficult part.
And Kwasi, you're coming to us from New York right now. Why do we get to have you in Boston?
Well, first of all, New York, I really wish I could have been there in person. We're just working on some really exciting stuff that we hope to share really soon. I love Boston. Like I said, I grew up in Somerville, but I spent most of my time in Boston. I went to RCC for, my initial college phase, and I've always loved Boston because it is diverse, and one of the advantages of being able to do this project is I always make the joke we have a small but mighty team. But realistically, we are the epitome of the United Nations. I kid you not. It's, any and everybody is on our team. And that's something that's so special to me, because everybody coming from different backgrounds and doing global comfort food, we're trying to make food and create a restaurant in a way that's not just, boom, this is what it is, and we're following this guidelines. There is different perspectives that are coming into this, project, and that's to me is one of the biggest advantages. As far as challenges go, I think just getting it off the ground is in itself a challenge, because have the different like Biplaw said, the different checklists of things that need to get done and the time that they got to get done in, that's extremely challenging. And we've done our best to really push the football forward, and it's worked so far, and it's been working, so we're just going to keep going.
It is a journey, especially in the city of Boston. We have another great question from the audience, which is, are there specific ingredients or maybe dishes that you're excited to expose more people to through the menu at Comfort Kitchen? Maybe Kwasi, we'll start with you.
Goat, jollof rice, dumplings, momos. You name. We could go on for hours. Do we have time for it? Spice mixes, suya, uh, masala. We could keep going. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of dishes and ingredients that we're playing around with. When we're coming up with the menu, we actually sit down, and it's not just myself sitting down in a corner somewhere writing a menu. Everybody has input, and we really, because our menus are essentially telling a story of wherever region we're working on. We do a lot of research, and I know Shelly's in the building. Shelly's notebook somewhere has like 13 pages of written. Oh, we're gonna do this. Oh no, too long. The idea of collaboration with the menu is gonna help us really touch on cuisines and ingredients that may or may not have been seen before, but even if they have been seen, they'll be presented in different and creative ways, allowing us to be creative in our own journey, but also um, sharing dishes that are of other cultures without compromising the integrity of those dishes. Because, to me, food is culture. So when you start messing around with people's food and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this is not what it's supposed to be, the purist will come for you. So there are certain things that we're trying to be creative with, but there are also things that we're really hoping to keep as authentic as possible.
Well, you had me at goat, but the rest of your answer was wonderful. We do have a related, pretty specific question, but I'm going to throw it out there. Any recommendations for how to use your Suya spice blend that folks may have gotten in your fantastic holiday gift box? Just an advanced plug for next year. If someone's in need of inspiration and they've got some Suya spice blend, what would you recommend?
Again, I am like the worst person to ask these things because I put that in everything. I put it in everything. I put it in stews, barbecue rubs. We even put it in a cookie because we would liked it so much.
Yeah.
So, but definitely like any roasting or grilling situation for, and suya spice generally comes with peanuts. It's usually made with peanuts, but we wanted to kind of take that out for allergies and all that. So what we've been doing is to impart that nutty and creamy flavor that the peanuts used to bring. We made it without the peanuts, including all the ingredients. And if you add brown butter to it, it makes everything much better. So barbecue, baste it with some brown butter, it'll be phenomenal.
I'm even hungrier. Yeah. So I think I want to kind of move to talking more about the community even outside of Comfort Kitchen. The work that you guys are doing and the food that you're putting out and the stories you're telling, you're what make me excited about the future of food and restaurants in Boston. And there are a lot of other folks here who work in food and who are the inspiration for all of us to keep going and to keep working towards this future we want. I think Tamika, the ambassador of GOAT, is here this evening. Yes. So, yeah, the first lady of GOAT. And so I would love to hear about who in Boston is really exciting you with their food, with the stories, with their message, and kind of an opportunity to plug some of the incredible folks in our
Absolutely.
community.
I mean, it's a laundry list. Definitely, I think, again, to go back to what I was saying earlier, it's a very interesting time, especially in Boston for food scene. And we are seeing a lot of people from communities that were really not given a platform in the past, like coming up with this innovative, great ideas. And I'm excited about all that. Tamika, food food and folklore is out there. Yesterday, our team, we went out to Orange, Massachusetts with Open Hearth by Ali and Judy. They're doing an awesome job. They do table to farm, outdoor fire cooking. So it's really awesome. Bar Noir by Kai. She brings black history to wine and spirits. And that's exciting because we haven't seen that in Boston. Again, Boston is very interesting because how many black bartenders have we actually dealt with? Literally, it's like you can count on my, one hand.
Right.
But there are a lot of black bartenders that are doing awesome job.
Yeah.
And I think it's the platform, it's the collaboration. So that's what we're trying to do is like bring friends and family that are doing awesome job, collaborate with them, bring their story forward. Kwasi, anyone in that Fresh Food Generation, great business that have been doing awesome job even before pandemic.
Right.
And a lot of people don't know about them. They opened their store or their location in Dorchester. So I'm missing a lot of names here.
That's a good list. Curious also, we have an audience question. Other than Comfort Kitchen, are there any other restaurants in the Boston area that you look to in terms of addressing inequality in the restaurant industry? And maybe Kwasi, we can start with you.
You mean your other restaurants that are addressing the concerns that we're trying to address?
Maybe there aren't any, and that is the problem that we're having. But if there are any that you would sort of look to or give a shout out to in terms of like other models for employment or wages or benefits.
So Juliet in Union Square, they've been in the forefront in terms of tipping system and the wages for the front of the house. So they are doing extremely awesome job. I would like to know more about it.
Yeah.
Brassica
Brassica, Oleana. There's a lot of places in Boston that have been doing it, but it wasn't being it was just a natural part of their being. You know what I mean? On top of my head, like you said, Brassica, Oleana, Juliet, they've been doing it. And in fact, we've been just kind of picking brains in between and just being like, all right, how are you approaching this? How are you approaching this? And I think the thing is, the ecosystem has changed a little bit. It used to be if you weren't doing, at least when I started cooking, if you weren't doing Italian or French food, you're probably not going to make it, right? But the doors have opened so much for so much more diversity in cuisine, but also in practice. And I think a lot of places in Boston, and this is what kind of excites me, is like the temperature of the industry in Boston is changing. And it's getting not only a lot more diverse, but I think between the pandemic and now, a lot of folks are starting or are continuing to create those systems around their restaurants that really help push the idea of sustainability, not just with food, but human sustainability as well. So that's my short answer for that.
Thank you. We have another question, which is actually something I've wondered too. Do you think there are other countries that are doing a much better job with their restaurant industries? Is there a best practice society out there somewhere? So many, like you said, Biplaw, so many of our problems here in the restaurant industry are very uniquely American, tying back to slavery, tying back to all kinds of social issues that we have here somewhat uniquely. So yeah, curious about your thoughts on that.
Short answer, no. But there are communities within a bigger system that have been doing it. And one thing I can think of is the Indian temples that are here in West Coast as well. They have a very communal kitchen where anyone and everyone can come in, eat, walk out,
right?
That kind of thing. But there hasn't been, by far and large, like for food industry, I think as a society, it's always been woman-driven, and we've devalued, women obviously for like many years. And it really, when you think about wages and like why people in restaurant industry are not getting paid the same way an accountant would get paid, right? We, as a society, we haven't explored that.
Right.
Or we haven't had the space to do it, or people don't do it. I mean, various reasons. But women have been always in the kitchen cooking food. We've seen women less off. So people automatically, if you're working in kitchen, why would I pay somebody more to cook this food, whatever reason it may be? So I think that's one reasoning to why we are so behind compared to other industries. There are some places in West Coast that are doing like awesome job in terms of like bringing gender equality to the forefront, but I really can't think of like many names.
Yeah. Kwasi, anything coming up for you with regards to that question?
Do I think there are other places that are doing it the way we want or doing it the way it should be? I honestly don't think so. Just because, the experience of dining out itself has always been devalued. When folks walk into your restaurant and they're like, well, I could cook at home. I could cook this. Well, you name it. And, it's pushed chefs into this ideology of, I got to make something that somebody can't cook at home, right? And then the food becomes a science project as opposed to food. But then, going out to eat is more of an experience than anything else. And I think until I don't know of any place that's doing it the way it should be done or doing better than we might not be doing that well, but I don't think there's any place out there doing better than us. I don't know. But I think it starts with actually, putting that value on going out to eat. Because when, going out to eat is more than just a meal. It's a communal thing. And as until that mindset changes, we're gonna keep doing it the same way we're doing it. And this is what we're trying to do. For us, it's more about kind of switching that mindset to like, no, we're not just giving you food. And hey, by the way, there's a woman downstairs making momos for 3 hours. You know what I mean? Most likely it's gonna be Biplaw's mom. Actually, it's gonna be Biplaw's mom. But it's like, hey, there's a guy in the restaurant that's, sweeping for hours or on the line for hours. So until we can raise the value of the experience of going out to eat, it's just gonna go the same way. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to approach it from a mindset perspective rather than just let's go eat some awesome food.
And I find that, diners it's very easy to fixate on the food on the plate and say,
Right.
I could go to the grocery store and make this for, 20% of the menu cost. And like, surprise, 20% is the industry standard for how much the ingredients cost on your plate. And so to your point, valuing everything else that goes into the experience, the humans, of course, their health insurance, their benefits, the air conditioning you're enjoying, the credit card processing that you get to have because you don't want to pay in cash, all of that is part of what you pay for, but you don't see it on the plate. And so it's so easy, I think, to forget about that. And this is reminding me of a conversation you and I have had many times, which is, sometimes people say that food is overpriced in
Right.
restaurants. Have you experienced some of that? And,
Yes.
and how do you think about that?
It's interesting. So, and I don't really blame customers for raising that question. It's a great question if they're willing to listen. And I don't think as consumers, we have that listening capacity to be like, all right, here's a problem. What's the solution? And what's my part in this problem?
Yeah.
Right? We've had complaints on our menu for a pop-up where people are like, well, I see only 8 okras on the plate and it's $15. Great question. Well, for us to put 8 okras on the table for you with all the condiments that goes with it, it took us 4 hours.
Yeah.
Right? And sourcing of okras don't grow easily. It's not easy to get. So all that counts for us to have that $15. And we are barely making $2 or $3 out of it to pay our staff. And you break it down, it's crazy.
Right.
So there's lack of, on the consumer side, I really wish we would ask more questions, we would do our own research and know exactly, the meal that comes on your table, it has traveled through hundreds of hands,
Right.
starting from Mexico all the way to Boston.
Yeah.
So what's the cost of it?
Yeah.
And then, it's a lopsided thing. It's like if you are willing to criticize, you should be open to listening as well.
Yeah. And a lot of people ask questions in restaurants that they don't actually want to know the answers
No,
to.
they don't. Yeah, it's like, here's my money, give me the food, I'm walking out.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know what's fun? I enjoy having those conversations. In fact, I will sit there for 3 hours with you. If you have the time, we'll talk about it. Because it comes down to education, having the consumer really understand what's happening. And when I say I would sit down for hours, I sat down for hours. With my own brother, mind you, with my own brother. And we sat and we talked for hours on end. And at the end of the day, you come back and say, okay, if you went to the most high-end restaurant in Boston right now, and you paid, let's say it's a special occasion, and you walked out spending maybe 800 and whatever dollars. No, not 800, that's too much. Maybe like 200 and something dollars. What did you pay for? It's like, oh, well, I paid for the atmosphere, it's like, okay, great. Well, we're creating that for you. So you're not having to go home. If you can make it at home yourself, well, go buy the stuff and go make it at home. It's that like open and shut question that can also be drawn out for hours if we want to, So for me, I always enjoy those conversations because it comes down to just touching somebody's ear and opening their eyes.
Absolutely. And, as we know well, the average profit margin for an independent restaurant in the US is somewhere between 4 and 6%. So on a $10 plate of okra or goat, at the end of the day, after all the bills are paid, the restaurant might keep 40 or 60 cents. That math checks out, I'm pretty sure. That is something that I don't know if diners know that because they just see the number at the bottom of the
Right.
check. And food is so expensive to produce and to produce with care. So I'm glad that we're able to talk about this. I hope we talk about it a lot more.
Yes.
But a related question to this, aside from asking questions and really wanting to know the answers, what else can diners do to support not just Comfort Kitchen, but really all restaurants right now as we come out of the pandemic? I'll start with you, Biplaw. You're nodding like you.
Yeah, Google website, that's the first thing that I would do. Talk to your friends, promote and actually visit businesses of color that has actually had, lacking of people walking in just because of the neighborhood they are in or just because of the way they look or because of how their food looks.
Right.
Give it a try. It doesn't hurt. If you're willing to eat $1 slice pizza, you should be, okay to visiting places that you may feel uncomfortable, but they are there to welcome you. So,
What a great point. Yeah. And Kwasi, for you, what would you ask for of your diners?
I think the pandemic has taught us a lot. The restaurant and food industry we're not out of the woods yet. Support restaurants and actually understand. And if you don't understand, ask. but understand for yourself, learn for yourself, and if you don't, ask. But understand that it's going to take a lot more than just food to get us out of this. There's restaurants that have closed over the pandemic. There's restaurants that just had to lay off massive amounts of employees just because they couldn't afford to keep them, and just know that we're not out here just like the notion that we're out here to just make money is ludicrous, because if people understood exactly how much restaurants actually brought home, that understanding has to happen. And I'm hoping that consumers and guests will be open to the idea of learning what it's taken to keep some of these places afloat or even open.
Right. I agree with that completely. We have one last question standing between us and a bunch of jerk jackfruit sliders in the lobby. So, what advice would you all give to other young folks who are interested in entering the culinary world as entrepreneurs, aside from maybe don't do it, which is what I think we've been talking about this whole time? But suppose someone has already made the terrible decision to commit to a career in this field.
Then might as well go with it.
Yeah. So what kind of advice do you have?
I would say, like, do things that makes you uncomfortable. Collaborate. There are other folks that are on the same journey as you.
Yeah.
I find oftentimes, especially in food industry, we are so into our work that we don't actually even have time to go to other restaurants
Right.
to enjoy a meal. So we are all fighting the same fight in different spaces. I think we need to create time and space where we can all come together, talk about issues, and find solutions. I truly believe there is a path forward to fix these problems. It's beyond us. The city has to be involved, state has to be involved, communities have to be involved. It's not a simple process. It is a complex one, but it is possible.
Yeah. And Kwasi, what about you? Some advice?
Don't do it if you don't love it. That's the shortest. Seriously, I ask people this. This is not something I'm just saying. I ask people this all the time. It's just, if you don't love it, restaurant world is just, you're gonna make yourself miserable. That's the short answer. It's like, I absolutely love this, and I feel like I haven't worked in like 14 years, even in the hardest of times. Even when it was like, when I was trying to decide if I should get deodorant or food, like that decision was a real decision that at some point as a young cook, I had to make. But I feel like I haven't worked in like 14 years, but that's because I absolutely love it. And my advice is, if you're doing it just because it's hip, if you're doing it just to make money, which you're not going to make millions of dollars. So, if you don't love it, just don't do it. But if you do love it, do it with 120% of your heart.
Thank you, Kwasi. And I think we have a lot of folks in the room tonight and joining us virtually who really do love it, and that's why they're part of our culinary community. And a lot of folks who really love you and what you're doing and are very excited for Comfort Kitchen to open. Comfort Kitchen, I should add, is available for catering gigs up until the opening of the restaurant. And we are all about to enjoy some lovely bites of what you all do. So thank you all so much for joining us. This has been really fun. It's a treat to have you here. It's a treat to have you here.
Absolutely.
And Kwasi, good luck on your top secret mission in New York City. And that's all we have time for tonight. So we'll welcome Amy back up. Thanks so much.
Thank you. This was so great. You are so inspiring. You're so smart. I cannot wait. What's the nearest tea stop to the restaurant in the summer?
Savin
Line,
Hill
what
and
is it?
JFK.
So JFK is our
JFK?
closest one. 7 or 8 minutes walk from there.
Yeah.
Write it down.
Can't wait. Yes, can't wait to tip your staff like 40%. And,
Yes.
can't wait. But
Absolutely,
thank you so much. Go and see what else is coming up at CitySpace, this joint. We are so busy, particularly in April. We've got so much stuff for you. So go to WBUR.org. www.biplaw.com/events. Check our calendar. Go eat those sliders.